All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess we can go on ahead and get started. We have some folks that are kind of slowly coming on in, so we're going to be patient for them. But we got to get started. 7 o'clock has passed, and I am so excited to share this information with everyone. I know Monique is as well. I'm going to turn it over to Monique and to Carolyn so that we can get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. My name is Monique Curry-Mims, and this is the Wealth Builder webinar series. And today we're going to be talking about tips to secure your path to growing your legacy. This webinar came together with the four of us for Black women who really wanted to understand how we could better support our community with helping them not only put things in place to support their families as they age and even pass, but how they can also come together to uplift each other as a community as a whole. Today, we are talking again just about legacy planning and really about the idea of estate planning. I'm going to kick it over to one of our panelists, Miss Roseanne. Nope, I'm sorry, Miss Carolyn.
Thanks, Monique, and thank you all for coming. I want to just introduce these two fantastic women that I see that has more experience in their short lifetimes than I had in my whole life. So I really appreciate them as being friends and professional colleagues. So we're going to first talk about Tanieka Thompson-Mungo. She's an estate planning attorney. She specializes in wills, trusts, and estate planning. She's a probate administrator, a real estate litigator. She's also a mediator, a legal researcher, and she also does a lot of public speaking, specifically for groups that I'm involved in. She never says no, and I really appreciate you, Tanieka, for that. We're also going to talk about Monique Curry-Mims. I met Monique recently. We had a conversation. Saw that we had a lot of things in common, had common goals, family concerns, and community concerns. And we just decided, let's put these four women together and do something about how we could help our communities and help our, not only community, but our people. Do some financial literacy teaching also. So Monique is the founder and CEO of Civic Capital Consulting. She's a philanthropic advisor. She's a social impact consultant, and she's a professor at Temple University. Monique, I'm just so proud of all your accomplishments. So you can take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So today, as part of our legacy planning conversation, we're going to talk about what estate planning is and why you actually need it, how to build a legacy through estate planning, and how to create a lasting legacy through charitable opportunities that will expand on what your estate really is now and generations ahead. So before we begin, we're going to kick off with a poll, and we really want to understand, do you know what an estate plan is? And do you actually have an estate plan already? So we're going to get that poll up just to start the conversation, just to get a feel for the room.
Okay, let's get started. I'm going to give y'all like 20 seconds because we don't know the answers to this one. All right, I think that we're coming close to enough time to debate whether. All right, I'm going to share the results here. Here we go.
Okay, thanks to the one person that has an estate plan, you are on it. But thank you for still coming to learn more. There's always more to learn. It's pretty typical, but we're glad you're here so that you guys can work on understanding what an estate plan is and how to actually get a plan in place.
Mm-hmm. All right, so now we get into my meat and potatoes, which is what is an estate plan? I absolutely love discussing estate planning. And I think a lot of people they lack the understanding of what exactly is an estate and whether or not having planning for your estate is important. or even something that should be done. So essentially, an estate is anything that you own. It could be tangible assets, it could be intangible assets. And especially in this modern age, there are so many more assets now that are considered to be a part of your, a part of your estate that traditionally weren't a part of the planning process. So thinking especially of your cars and your real property and, you know, your clothing and things like that. Traditionally, that's been what people think of when they think of an estate. But with the modern age where you have all these digital assets, and all of those newer and more modern ways to grow your wealth, that's also another way that we can plan for those assets and how they can be distributed in the future. Can we go to the next slide? So as I mentioned, what exactly is it that does constitute an estate? Traditionally, you know, we think about the jewelry and the insurance policies and your bank accounts and your furniture, you know, because I just hate to say it, but as soon as something happens, here come people. They're looking for what they're going to get. And, you know, you always have that kind of joke. Here come Pookie. You got to put Pookie out there. You got to put Pookie out there. But it really and truly encompasses so much more. So it's definitely important to be mindful of all the things that you do own, even if there are things that are not necessarily at the top of your mind. So things like even are people that, you know, that are really heavy into Bitcoin and these digital assets. Those are things that are definitely worthwhile planning for and understanding how it can be kept safe, how it can be passed down, or how it can be transferred, because a lot of we're stepping into new territory and trying to understand how to plan for those assets with a lot of the planning tools that we have in place. So it really and truly is so important to be at the forefront of understanding what exactly is in your estate and keeping track of it. It's really fascinating to me when I do share my intake forms with clients, and they always tell me, oh, no, I don't really have much. But then when you put it down on paper, it is so much more than you could have ever really imagined. So it's very much so thinking of a lot of other things that are a part of your estate, and, you know, just being mindful that even if you think it may not be, it may very well be a part of the estate. Next slide, please. And I just went through that. So next, planning for business owners. That is another very tricky issue, because you definitely want to have the proper documents in place, especially if you're a business owner. It is very difficult when a business owner has their business going to probate without the proper documents in place. It makes it very challenging to accomplish certain tasks. So it's so important to have very specific business-oriented documents in place. And I encourage folks to go to a professional to get those documents drafted so that they can reflect what your actual needs and your wants are for your business in the event of not only your incapacity, but also your passing. Who is going to step in and make decisions in the event that something happens to you as a business owner? It's also important to consider the structure of your business. And when you're making gifts to other individuals, what does that look like? What kind of implications does that bring up for the recipient of the business? Do they need to be licensed to be able to take over this business? There are so many things to take into consideration when you're planning for your business and gifting it to someone else, or you're gifting it to your family. So definitely a lot of things to think about. Also, having a clear understanding of the assets that are included in the business. What debts do the business have? So there's so many things to think about, and also the tax consequences. There are so many things to think about, but we never really think about them because it's not top of mind. And that's why you consult with a professional to help you uncover those blind spots, per se, that you may not necessarily think of as being something that is important, but it may just be very crucial in your planning process. I thank you so much. You are on it, Monique. So my next slide is, do you really need an estate plan? Short answer, yes. Everyone needs an estate plan. even if you get the planning that doesn't necessarily end up in probate, which, you know, I'll go through what exactly that would be in just a few minutes, but it's essential that everyone has a plan so that at least it's clear as to what your wishes are. Because otherwise, if you don't have a plan, the state that you live in has a plan for you, and it's called intestacy. And at the end of the day, you want to make sure that your wishes are documented and it is very clear as to what it is that you would like to happen. So as I mentioned, oh, Monique, thank you. So what are the advantages of estate planning? Estate planning gives you an opportunity to have a voice beyond the grave. It gives you an opportunity to really and truly express your desires even while living, but you may lack capacity. So a lot of people don't necessarily think of estate planning as something that encompasses planning for incapacity, that being, you know, you may be in a coma, you could just be very ill or suffering from some terminal illness. God knows, life is unexpected. So having certain documents in place can definitely play a crucial role in making sure that the appropriate individuals that you would like to make decisions on your behalf are there and can make those decisions based on your guidance. Because sometimes, you know, we definitely want to think or believe that our family will do what it is that we like. But sometimes some people are driven by their own motives and make decisions that they feel are in your best interest, which may be counter to what it is that you want to happen. So as this slide says here, estate planning does give you an opportunity to remain in control, and it helps you to provide for yourself and also for your loved ones. It gives you the opportunity to designate who will make decisions with the hope that there are reduced costs. So say, for example, I'm going to give some examples because it's so important to give examples of what I've seen in my practice, especially with disabled or incapacitated individuals where there were no documents that were in place. And now you end up in probate court. And now you have the family members fighting over who's going to be responsible for making decisions for this family member. It could be mom, it could be dad, it could be brother or sister. It can be anyone. So having those documents in place, it already gives you the opportunity to say, if something happens to me, I want this specific person to make the decisions on my behalf because they understand what it is that I want. They're going to make the decisions that I would make if I could make these decisions by myself. And it also, it does result in reducing some of the additional fees that could be incurred from having to go the route of having legal actions be initiated. It gives you an opportunity in this last point here to create a framework of what it is that will happen, when you want it to happen and how you want it to happen. So having estate planning in place is so tremendously important, and it's so crucial to have it in place. Next slide. Estate planning is life planning. Simple as that. But it can be so much more. Estate planning does give you an opportunity to create a benefit for causes and purposes that are close and near and dear to you. It is always so, and it's so inspiring to see some of my clients give back to not only organizations, but also purposes that have molded them or contributed to their development in life. So definitely using your estate planning to not only give back to schools or to donate to organizations that have a very near and dear meaning to your heart is so tremendously important. But definitely also thinking of self, but thinking of others is also a part of the planning process. Next slide, please. Thank you.
So how can you use estate planning to build your legacy? You know, as Tanieka was saying, it is life planning, right? So there are a lot of facets to your life now and what your family's life will be if you are no longer here or you are incapacitated. So it's really being able to come together and have a comprehensive and strategic plan on how you're really going to divide and distribute your finances, whether it's to your family now or to your family later, whether it's to organizations that you want to support or causes, or even if you're looking at putting putting items in place now at your young age so that when you are older, you are able to receive income from them. And then once you pass, be able to pass them on, right? It's just a way that you can organize your assets now so that you have those decisions around what's going to happen later, not only for your peace of mind, but for Pookie and everyone else's peace of mind as well. How you are distributing your wealth and your assets now and later is really what estate planning is about, and being able to build that legacy of whatever it is that you want. If you want that legacy of wealth for your family, then that's that. If you want a legacy of community impact, then that's your legacy, and putting that plan in place to get there.
So how can you plan for your estate? This is such a very crucial slide. So if you can do a screenshot, this is the one to do a screenshot of. So there are certain documents that I do encourage my clients at absolute minimum to have in their estate plan. They not only include a last will and testament, which is the document that will direct what it is that will happen to your assets at the time of your passing, if that's the type of planning tool that you choose to use. This will have to go through probate. A lot of people always think, oh, I have my will. It tells everybody what they need to do, but they never understand the fact that a will still has to go through the process of probate. It has to be proven. Someone has to be appointed by the court with the proper authority to make the distributions from your estate in the way that you have designated. So that is definitely one of the most important documents to have. Also, having a durable power of attorney. Who would you like to be responsible for making decisions related to your finances if you do become incapacitated? Another thing to keep in mind is that a lot of people think that a power of attorney goes beyond your life. Once you pass away, a power of attorney is no longer effective, but it is such an important tool to have in place in the event that you become incapacitated, so that your affairs can continue to be managed in the appropriate manner as to how it is that you've directed. Also, having an advanced healthcare directive or a healthcare proxy. This document has a couple different names in different states. It just depends on where it is that you live. So be mindful that it may be called something else in your state. But having a document that gives instructions on what is to happen or who's to make decisions in the event that you become incapacitated related to your health care. Some people never really think about, death and who's going to make the decisions. If I am in a coma, what would you like to happen? There are things that a lot of people don't like to think about. It may be unpleasant, but it's a realistic part of life. Death is a part of life. So we definitely have to take the time to really sit in and think about these things and have these appropriate documents in place so that the right decision or the decisions that you would prefer are made at the time, if that time comes. Additionally, I always encourage my clients to have a HIPAA authorization. A HIPAA authorization is a document that provides access to your medical records. So it gives the listed individuals access to view your documents, or at least your records, and make an educated decision as to what needs to be done based on not only discussions with your doctors and your physicians, of course, but at least they'll have an opportunity to view your medical records and understand greatly what kind of medical conditions you may have had in the past. Also, a living will is important to have, and that's just a personal choice. If you want that to be known that, if something happens to me and I'm incapacitated, or there's no chance of me recovering, allow my natural death to occur, or whatever that choice may be. You may just want to be kept alive. Everyone has a different choice and an opportunity to make that clear in their documents. Also, a revocable or irrevocable living trust. Now, you hear it on the streets. A lot of people get a trust, get a trust, get a trust, get a trust. It is so important to understand the purpose of the trust that you are getting. and understand that there are multiple kinds of trusts, and there are multiple kinds of estate planning attorneys that specialize in different kinds of planning. So yes, I can say I want a revocable or an irrevocable trust, but what exactly is your goal with your trust? Are you planning for a special needs family member? That's a special needs trust. So are you planning for an older family member? You may need a Medicaid asset protection trust. So it is so crucial to meet with the appropriate professional that understands and knows, has the very much so specialized knowledge to guide you in your planning journey, because it is a journey. It is not a one size fits all experience. It is something that needs to be planned, specifically tailored to you. I do have a couple of my colleagues who specialize in elder law planning, and that is a whole different niche area as well. So understanding that meeting with the appropriate attorney to assist you with your particular needs is so important, as well as if you are so inclined and wanting to create and build that legacy, going the route of a revocable trust is such an important way to do that. And also having other assets in place that may not necessarily reveal benefits now, but it will upon your passing, such as having life insurance. Life insurance is such an amazing tool and such a helpful way to create the legacy that you wanted to have for yourself. You can create that gift for your heirs and for your legacy, for your family, by having very specifically tailored policies put in place that will start that journey towards, are we going to be like the Kennedys? We're going to be like the Kennedys. Yeah. So having that in place, we can go ahead and start our legacy for the Kennedys. And as I mentioned, this slide just goes through and explains what a will is, but I've already explained that to you. But I really want us to switch gears and discuss having a trust that creates the opportunity for you to build that legacy, not only for your children, for your grandchildren, also to do it in a philanthropic way that creates an opportunity for other organizations to grow and build. And that way you get to leave your legacy to contribute to your community.
So speaking of contributing to your community, utilizing a will to build your legacy is allowing you to itemize and write down and understand how you're going to have lasting impact and who's going to be part of that lasting impact. Being able to think beyond your current financial assets or even your financial assets, right? A lot of people don't think about the idea that you can will property and assets to nonprofits, to organizations. A lot of colleges have homes that might now be fraternity homes or sorority homes, or a home that's now some kind of converted office building, right? And a lot of times those were willed homes that were left from a donor to that university. So really being able to think about what a value you have that maybe your family might not want, but you might or you might not want to give them, and who is going to actually get it, right? Who's being honored in your will? What values are you passing down? And not even just the value of items, but what are the actual values that your family is honoring as you think about what happens when you are no longer here, right? A lot of times, especially within a Black community, grandma and granddad built that house from the ground up and it got sold or it got something happened to it. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're rolling over in their grave. You're saying they're rolling over in their grave because you know how much they valued that house for their family, right? For your family. But because you didn't, or they didn't think about a will and putting that house in the will, and there wasn't an actual family constitution or an idea of family values around what that house means to the family, it gets lost by the wayside and the legacy of that family starts over again. That's literally what happens to us as a people, right? We're not really thinking beyond our current generation. And, Tanieka mentioned the Kennedys. I think about the Rockefellers, right? Again, generationally, they think about how they are going to build past the current generation, right? JD started it, and I'm not going to say he started it in the best lights. That's a whole other conversation for another webinar in our series. but he had the idea of building wealth and legacy for his family. And he did that through his will and through some other items that we'll talk about as we go on through this today. So, poll time. Do you have a will? So several of you said you did not have an estate, but do you have a will? Do you have one? Have you been thinking about one? And a question that's not on here, and you're going to say no if you have it. You had a will that's 20 years old. You didn't have kids, or you had one kid. Now you got 5 kids and you own 3 properties and it hasn't been updated. And I'm guilty of that. I'm not even going to deny it. I need to update my will, right? So you're not alone. You're not alone.
You know what? That transparency is everything, Monique. Thank you.
I'm not gonna front. I'm not gonna front. I need to update my will.
All right, I'm gonna end this poll. Let's share the results. Okay, we're not so bad. It's yes,
Okay.
no, kind of 40% yes, 33% no, 22. I'm thinking about it.
Okay, so majority don't, but we're good that we're thinking about it. And again, glad that you're on this conversation so that we can, steer you guys in the right direction around what you need to look for as you're starting to put some of these things into place.
Okay, what is a trust? OMG, Monique, have you heard people say to you, hey, I'm gonna go get me this trust?
Man, I actually was on, I don't know, it's October, right? So it's estate planning month.
Yes.
I've never seen so many Instagram influencers talking about trust. I'm like, wait a minute, since everybody know about trust, I didn't know that the streets are talking about trust left and right all over the gram. Yes.
All day, every day, but they don't come and see the people like me. But that's okay.
Trying to send them to you, Tanieka.
That's okay. That's okay. You know what? I love every last one of my clients. But but let me get into explaining exactly what a trust is. A trust is a planning tool. It is a planning tool that allows you to essentially have a greater voice beyond the grave than a will ever will. It ever could. So it gives you an opportunity not only to plan for what you want to happen right now, but if, say, for example, you have a family member that is not a good steward of their resources, I'm gonna say it in that nice way, or they're real
financially irresponsible.
I'm about to say they loose with their money, but that's okay. Or they're not as financially literate as they could be. But it gives you the opportunity to not only protect them from themselves, but it gives you the opportunity to provide for them when you're not here. So a trust is essentially an agreement that you, as the grantor, can create, and you have so much autonomy in directing when it is that certain things can occur or when they will occur. So it gives you also the opportunity, as Monique's going to discuss a little bit more with the charitable gifting, to also gift certain assets to charities in the event of someone else passing. So say, for example, you have a family member that's near and dear to you that you want them to receive a particular asset, but if they're not here to receive it, then it will go to this other organization. Or you may donate to a school that really poured into you and nurtured you and made you grow into the individual that you are. But essentially, it is a planning tool that will assist you to provide for not only family, but also for your charitable goals and accomplishing those things. And also I also want to make one more mention of our special needs family members, because a lot of people don't keep in mind that special needs family members also still need the appropriate planning to ensure that they do not lose their benefits. I particularly do not specialize in special needs planning, but it's something that I really, really have to mention, that it is so crucial to have the appropriate planning in place. But it does give you the opportunity to provide for others upon your passing and to continue to do so. And that is a part of your legacy. Bring it to the next slide.
So, building a legacy with your trust. Again, it really depends on what you're trying to do. You can preserve wealth and make sure that your money and your assets stay in your family, right? And then we think about Rockefeller, he created an irrevocable trust, right? He made sure that it built over time, over generations, right? You're also utilizing it to control your asset distribution. Who's getting what and when are they getting it? You don't have to give anyone anything now. You can wait. You can skip generations, right? You can wait generations down the road. Maybe your kids are acting up and, kids are humans and they're going to do what they want to do. And oftentimes it's not what their parents want them to do. So you're like, you know what? You go do you, I'm going to take care of my grandkids, right? Or I'm going to take care of their kids, right? So you're able to control what's distributed and when. You can support your loved ones, as Tanieka said, whether it's elder care or, someone with a disability or just wanting to really support your family. You can really think about who needs to be helped and how, and being able to meet with the right kind of trust attorney to help you set that up. And then also the charitable side of it, really thinking about what organizations and causes you want to support that you care about and how you want to do that. Whether you want to give them a one-time gift, whether you want to give them gifts over time, whether you want to give them assets, right? Again, controlling that asset distribution, regardless if it's family or organization. So how can you build an estate with your legacy? It's really about that idea of what you're doing, where you're going, what you have, what you value. So that intergenerational wealth transfer, I just kind of mentioned that a moment ago, whether it's you're planning for the next generation or 2 generations or 6 generations from now, right? Being able to really put a plan in place that allows for that to actually help. And then really thinking that out, something like that takes a lot of planning, meeting with not just your estate planning advisor, but your financial advisor, your tax advisor, your lawyer, like every type of advisor you have or should have, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. You really need to work all together to figure out what you can afford now. And even, I'm 40. If I'm thinking about generational wealth, I also have to think about retirement, right? I own my own company. So outside of my 401k that's building and, what I've been kind of pouring into it separately, I have to really think about what's going to happen when I retire, right? So if I'm thinking about my wealth and being able to make money or get an income off of something that I have in a trust, how is that going to impact what my family gets later, right? So really meeting with your financial advisor to really figure out those things. Thinking about your charitable giving. Are you going to make a pledge, right? So when you tell a nonprofit that you're going to give them a certain amount of money at a certain day and time, you're not just writing a check now, that's called a pledge. Is that pledge coming in now? Is it coming in next year? Is it coming in 10 years from now? Is it a multi-year grant where you said, I'm going to give you $1 million over the next 10 years, over the next 2 years, right? So really thinking about what you're giving and how you're giving it. Maybe you want to support a family business or even allow your family to start businesses. Rockefeller allowed for his kids to be able to draw money from the trust to start businesses, right? That was part of his plan. He wanted to create that or not create, but allow that entrepreneurial spirit to still build within his family and build the wealth on top of just growing the wealth that he started, right? And when you're looking at certain things, especially if you're looking at the types of trust or even your charitable giving, talking to your tax attorney and your tax advisor and your financial advisor and thinking about the ways that you can utilize these different planning tools to minimize your tax liability. How are you thinking? I don't think a lot of people think about, oh, I'm going to give this to my family and not know that there's that wealth transfer tax, right? So what can you do to avoid those things, right? How do you set up a plan that allows for your family to not have to pay half of that money or a good chunk of that money back to Uncle Sam? That's money that you built that you probably already been taxed on twice or 3 times, depending on how you got it and if you're really what you did with it, right? Because they tax every dollar 3 times, right? So now they're going to tax it again. You want to make sure that you want to minimize that liability as much as possible. And of all, avoid family conflicts, right? Don't do these things in a void, right? Don't just sit down with your advisors and just say, here's what I'm doing for my family. Maybe they don't want to do that. There are so many people and families that have businesses are like, I'm gonna leave my business to my kids. And the kids are like, I don't want this business. This business took my parents away, or I want to be a chef in Paris. I don't want to be here and, run a clothing company or whatever the case may be, right? So really being able to say, okay, the house is going into the trust. No one person is getting the house. Or, okay, we're going to sell the business and use the funds to do X, Y, and Z, or put it into a foundation. So really being able to talk to your family. Again, that family constitution is really important. Having them come together to really understand the values that your family has and how it's going to not only live out your life now, but how it's going to build your legacy later. So there are other ways other than those documents that Tanieka talked about to really focus on building your legacy. They're charitable trust, family foundations, and donor advised funds. And these are charitable ways on the philanthropic side to get there.
Hold on,
Uh,
I got a question.
yes.
What exactly is a family constitution? Because you mentioned that earlier, and
I
don't
did.
know if everybody knows what that is. Do you mind sharing a little bit more information, Monique?
No problem. So it is a document that your family, just like we have a Constitution of the United States, that said these are the laws of our land. It is not necessarily the laws, but it is the values and the plan for your family that your family has come together around. You're outlining what you guys stand for, what you value, what you care about. And granted, everybody's going to care about something different, right? That's fine. But where there's alignment in the family, right? That's really what this Constitution is about. That way, when you are creating a trust or you're creating a foundation or a donor advised fund, or you're just figuring out what to do with the house, everybody is already in alignment and in agreement with where you are going. Where this family legacy, not individual people and their needs, but where the legacy of the family and the values of the family are going way beyond your passing or grandma's passing or whoever's passing. So it's just that document that's like, this is the law of our family. And work with a philanthropic advisor to set that up. But with a charitable trust, again, Tika said there's a lot of trust. A charitable trust is a vehicle that allows for you to support not only just organizations that are charitable as a donor, but also individuals in a sense, right? So you're able to put funds and assets and resources into this charitable entity for the benefit of society. Now, charitable trust can be irrevocable. You know, it can stay with the actual nonprofits that you're giving these funds and assets to, mainly on the asset side, right? But you do have trusts that build income, right? That build value, right? And you can spin off income from it yearly or bi-yearly or however you set it up. That income can go to the charity, or the income can come to the family. Or if it's an asset and you say, okay, well, you can utilize this asset for however many years, but then it has to come back to the family. Again, those are something that you need to really think about. You really have to have a plan on what your actual legacy is and how you're utilizing your assets for now and later, and really having a meeting of the minds with all of your advisors, right? What are the tax implications? What are the legal implications? What are those philanthropic implications if you're really trying to make an impact? So again, consult with all of your advisors, but make sure that when you're working with a charitable trust, that the idea of it is the bulk of it at any given time is really for the benefit of society with value to the family and individual secondary.
I got a
With the
question.
yes.
Before you keep steamrolling.
Yeah, I'm on it. Let me know.
Because you mentioned the charitable trust with the gifting of land. So don't a lot of schools, like a lot of universities, get property and they have their buildings, and if they don't use it solely for that purpose,
it could be pulled back, you know. And so the interesting thing is there's a couple of things, right? And this is thinking about your estate plan. Some people will say, I'm going to give land, I'm going to give a building, and you have to use the building in that for that benefit, right? So if I give a building, I say this building has to be used for the benefit of the education department. If the non-education department decides to come in and take it over, the family does have the right to pull that land and that property back. On the other side of it, sometimes you see buildings with names on them. Those aren't through charitable trust, that's through a really big check. But at the same time, that donation might only go but so far. They might have to do renovations, or somebody might come along with a bigger check and say, well, you can add an extension, so take that name down, right? So that goes back to your legacy. Do you want to put your name on a building that might come off. And a lot of buildings that stay with the name, that's because they probably have a trust or they have some kind of planning vehicle that's contributing to that university every year. So again, it really just goes back to the type of giving that you're doing and what your legacy, what you really want your legacy to be within that organization, within that university, within that nonprofit, with whatever organization you're really working with.
Thank
Answer
you.
your question? You're
Yes,
welcome.
Thank you.
So with a family foundation, so these are legal entities, right? They're established 501c3 organizations themselves, but they are typically endowed organizations, right? Rockefeller Family Foundation, right? So they have money that is sitting in an endowment that is growing. But it is a legal entity, right? It needs to operate. It needs a board. It needs a staff, right? So there's a lot of obligations, especially as a charitable entity, that you even have to meet with the IRS and the government to maintain your status. So while you might have a chunk of money, and this is actually how a lot of families maintain their wealth, right? You put your money into an endowment, and by law, you only have to give out 5% a year. So you're putting your money into this endowment. It's growing every year, right? It's in an investable vehicle. It's not just sitting in a regular bank account. It's sitting in some kind of invested account, and it's growing every year. So that's how foundations are able to give out money every year over year, because one, they're only giving out around 5%. And typically that 5% might be about as much money as they made off their investment, right? But that 5% is encumbersome of not only your grant making, but your operations. So a lot of times the family foundations, who's running the family foundation? The family. So now you have your family generation after generation with a job. You've now got jobs for your family for generations here on out, right? They're maintaining your legacy, they're managing your wealth or part of your wealth, and they have jobs. And again, having that constitution, having that idea of what the family value is, allows for them to engage in philanthropy together to create and build that legacy way beyond you, right? So whatever value you establish for your family is going to long outlive you, and your impact on generations far beyond you is going to be there because you established that constitution, you established your values, and now you have this organization that's just growing and growing, and not only helping your family, but helping the communities that you live in or lived in and you wanted to serve.
But I got
Now,
another
yeah, go
question.
ahead. I'm not switching yet, but go ahead.
Did you just say that we can teach our family to continue this process of building a legacy by having them in place to work within the foundation and run it so that it teaches the future generations the same skill?
I did. And a lot of family foundations, right now, a lot of foundations, there's the old guard, right? So a lot of family foundations are being run by the older generation that's getting ready to retire. And right now, they're training their kids and or grandkids to now pick up those reins. And it's just going to keep going. And these are foundations that have been established for generations. So even the people that, I consult with, they were not even the original establisher of the foundation. It was either their parents, and their parents had a business, their parents might have owned the Campbell Soup Company and sold it and started this foundation, or they had a shoe company that, whatever, I'm not going to get into my clients' businesses, but but they actually, they had a business just like the Rockefellers that they decided to sell or go public with, and they got their chunk and they used part of it, because the other part of it is the minute it goes into the foundation, you get a tax write-off. That is the reason why you have to give out 5% a year, because the minute that money has gone in, so, let's say you sold your business and you sold it for millions, you can put that money into a foundation, create a foundation and put it into this entity. You're going to get a tax write-off for however many millions you just put into establishing that foundation, right? You can't just leave that money there, because when you got the tax write-off, you're now a foundation, you're a nonprofit organization. It has to be for the benefit of society. You can't just sit on it and hoard it and just keep it there. So they mandate that you have to give out 5% a year. And that's the minimum, right? No more, no less than 5%. And that 5% is on a I'm going to mess this up. It's either a 3 or 5 year average. I have to follow up. I think it's a 5 year average. So over the course of 5 years, so let's say last year you did 10%. Well, if this year you don't do 5%, that's okay. You don't have to give out any money this year, or you don't, or you just give out your staff funds. And that's what a lot of organizations do, especially after the pandemic, right? A lot of organizations gave out a ton of money. They went above that 5%. And now they're like, oh, we spent too much money. We're worried about our principal. We're worried about that, we took too much money out and it's impacting our bottom line. So we're gonna pull back right now and wait till our 5 year average is up. And then we're gonna come back. So that happened a lot with foundations. But now this is a lot of work. This is a company. On the other hand, at donor advised funds, typically these sit with community foundations. But at donor advised fund, you can take that same amount of money and give it to a community foundation to manage for you as a donor advised fund. They manage it, you've donated to them, but as the donor, you are advising who gets the money. So it's not as though they're taking your money and just doing whatever they want with it. They're taking your money and they're only doing it with it what you say. Now, the loophole here is donor advised funds, for some reason, they don't have mandatory payouts. So you can put that money in and a lot of people just sit on it. So that's like, I guess, a plus. The con is that your family's not running it, right? So you're just sitting on the money. It's not as though it's coming into your family in a way, unless your family is starting a nonprofit itself, right? Because that money has to go to a charitable 501c3 entity. So if your grandkids want to start nonprofits and run nonprofits, there's some double dealing in there. But there's no way for your family to really benefit out of that donor advised fund. But it allows for a family to start. You can start as little as some organizations, $5,000, right? You don't have to have millions of dollars to start a donor advised fund and to start building those values with your family, with your kids. You can start small and allow them to grow and understand what philanthropy and community really means to you and your family, and give out grants to eligible organizations without all of the operational stress that a foundation brings with actually operating an organization. But with all of these, it's important to really build your team.
So just as we have been consistently restating, it is so important to have the appropriate individuals or the appropriate professionals in place to assist you with building or putting the particular tools in place to accomplish your goal. So, for example, having someone like me, an estate planning attorney, is also quite crucial. Having a CPA, a certified public accountant, having a tax attorney is so tremendously important, because we don't want to get in trouble with Uncle Sam. We want to make sure we keep everything right there in line. And also having a financial advisor, having that person that can definitely recommend the appropriate product in their line of services that will help you accomplish the goal in the future. Having a philanthropic advisor like Monique, and okay, I like the head nod. So that you can get advice or be guided towards the most appropriate kind of tool to accomplish your legacy building goal. Having an insurance advisor and buying the right kind of insurance policy that will provide at the most appropriate time. Granted, there are tons of insurance kinds of policies, and I felt like I had the little squiggly guy, that emoji with the squiggly eyes? It's just like lost in the sauce with insurance policies. There are so many different policies. And even I was discussing it with Carolyn.
Right. There are. And there's not only so many different policies, but there's also so many ways to use the policy, right? An individual doesn't even have to be a beneficiary, right? A nonprofit can be a beneficiary. Your trust can be your beneficiary, right? There's a lot of, especially in the Asian culture, they utilize insurance and other means to build family banks, right? Yep. So there's lots of different ways that you can utilize these tools, but making sure that you meet with an advisor to really talk about what your goals are so they can let you know what all of the different ways to use them are is very important. It's a lot deeper than we normally just think about what it is.
So with what you just said, Monique, we need to start thinking outside the box.
Exactly. We're behind the ball on this because everybody else is thinking outside the box and supporting their families generationally. We're playing catch up right now. And the point of this in this series is to help us play catch up. So we've got a couple of minutes left. Are there any questions other than the ones that Tanieka has been reading out of the chat? Anyone want to come off mute, raise your hand, or drop something into the chat box? You can do so now.
But in the interim, we can go ahead and talk about what we're gonna do with this series, because I like where this is going. I really do.
Yes. So it's estate planning week while y'all get your questions together. Next week is estate planning week. So we wanted to drop this so that you guys can start thinking about what it's going to take for you to build your estate and meet with the appropriate advisors to do so. So you've got some ideas going. Hopefully we spark some interest and got your box opened, right? Go meet with some advisors next week and start planning your estate and building your legacy.
And remember, it is a journey. It is definitely a journey and not a one size fits all process. So definitely keep an open mind and be receptive to different suggestions. Ooh, so, well, we have
Okay,
another
do we have any questions?
comment.
I see
I don't see any.
one.
Can a holding company be moved into an irrevocable trust? I'm going to assume that that's what that means. I will definitely advise that you speak to an advisor about that, but as a company, making sure you have those right documents in place as to what your estate looks like after you pass, or if you keep the company and where it's going to go, is going to be imperative. So you definitely need to speak to an estate planning attorney to see if your company is eligible and how exactly it could be moved, if and how it can be moved.
And can I give one disclaimer, even with doing that?
Yes.
I understand a lot of people like to say, well, my cousin, uncle, brother, sister, mother is an attorney and, she can do it or he can do it. No, please go to an attorney that practices that particular area of law, because it is so crucial to understand what is necessary or what needs to be included in your documents so that nothing falls through the cracks.
How do I keep? Yep. How do I keep my family from fighting over my decisions if possible? By including them in that conversation.
That part, yes.
Right. I mean, that's really what it is. I mean, it's part of what I do when we're talking about charitable planning, because a lot of times families are like, wait, you giving your money to who? You're not coming to us. So being able to keep them in the conversation is important throughout the entire process. If you're establishing what values are for your family with your family, you're not just saying, look, this is what I'm doing. And actually having them see what you're doing and why you're doing it. If it's forced upon them and you're just like, this is what's going to happen, it's almost like getting that buy-in, right? Like they don't feel as though they had a say. They don't understand why you really did it. They don't really have a say. But if you're including them the entire time throughout that process, and granted, at the end of the day, it's your decision, but if you have them as part of it along the way, it makes it a lot easier in the end.
But I will say this though, Monique, because even when you do include them in the process, sometimes you have that outlier. I'm just saying, and I'm just
so they're not gonna like it. It's your decision in the end. But you have. Yep, go ahead.
May I ask a question? I know with today's millennials and others, they rely heavily on the internet and what the internet says. And very often there are documents that are on the internet that says, you just have to fill this out and voila, you have a legacy plan, you have an estate plan. What is your opinion on those types of instruments that are being thrown about on the internet? I know they don't have as much validity as sitting with you, Tanieka, but I wanted to raise the issue because a lot of folks tend to go that route because they either don't want to pay, they don't know better, they just want something quick and fast and in a hurry, or they think they don't have any assets worth going any deeper about. So can you give a brief response to that?
don't do it.
That was quick.
I mean, those documents are they're so generic, and different states have different rules. So even though you may go on the internet and find this form document and think, oh my gosh, this covers everything that I need, there are things that you may not even know that are required in your state. So using generic forms, or even, oh my gosh, you know, people used to go to Office Max and Office Depot and buy the will document out of there too. Please don't do that either. Because your documents may not necessarily meet the requirements of your state, or even clearly express what it is that you need. I'll give one quick example. I know we're cutting it short on time, but I have seen where one heir created a will for his parent and actually disinherited himself from his parents' estate with the way that he drafted the document, because he did not know what he was doing. So
that part is what I wanted you to emphasize, because it's so easy to think that you're doing the right thing, but you're doing the wrong thing without asking the subject matter experts like yourselves and like Carolyn and I as to how to proceed if we want to bulletproof our estate plan, if we want to create a trust or will, or have some philanthropic aspect to our estate. So I know we're running on time, but I want to give a plug. Number one, thank you, Tanieka and Monique, for your expert advice. Thank you for your input. Thank you for your willingness to do this series. Yes, Tanieka.
There was one last question that popped up, and I don't
Okay,
want to.
I didn't see it.
Question, and it says, is there a group that covers all these legacy areas to get a holistic advisory? In other words, everyone talks to each other.
So I don't think I've seen one organization, but it's called the table. You have to create the table, right? So you have to be able to say, this is my philanthropic advisor, this is my estate planner, this is my tax attorney, and they are coming together and you're meeting, right? And it's one family, right? And they're making sure that what one person is doing is not impacting the other and not setting you up, but you're creating an advisory table and you're bringing all the players to the table for a holistic advisory group. I have not seen an organization that does every single thing. They're just so, it's just so vast.
And
But
as
what does
financial
happen?
advisors, Roseanne, as financial advisors and planners, that's what we do. We make sure that we keep in the loop all the contacts and professionals that need to be involved in putting together your plan. So that's what we do all the time. We ask you the question, if you have an attorney, if you don't, we'll try to recommend at least two. You choose who you want. If you don't have a CPA, a tax accountant, we may give you recommendations or give you at least two, and then you make that decision. But we don't advise you to make decisions about all your assets or all your plans that you put in place unless we have those additional professionals involved.
It's kind of like a recipe. When you're trying to bake a cake, right? Do you just decide to take out the eggs and just try to bake a cake? I mean, you're going to have something, a blob, or take out the yeast if you're trying to make a bread because you feel like you figured it all out. You have components that are there and that are measured very often for a specific reason. They're all part of the ingredients to make the cake become a cake or the bread become a bread. And it's in the same way, if you're thinking about your life planning or legacy planning or estate planning, there are subject matter experts who have their lanes under which they operate, that you will have to be able to meet with those individuals based on recommendations like Carolyn said, but also you start where you start. And the starting point is making sure that we get all the facts and all the data surrounding your issue and what's important to you, what's your priority, and what can you implement in terms of making sure that you bulletproof your life and your legacy for generations to come. We're running out of time, but I want to make sure that we talk about our Web Builders Retirement Income Planning series. It's a series that we're going to do next. It's the next seminar, November 14th. I'd love you all to attend. It's at 7 o'clock, and we're really going to talk about streams of income, how to build that income in retirement and ensure that your plan and your money outlast you. So without further ado, we just want to thank you for your time, and we hope to see you on the 14th. Carolyn and I will be presenting, and we'll make sure to answer all your questions. If you think of questions that you would like us to address beforehand, please send them to us. We'll take those under consideration as well. And so without further ado, thank you again.
I want to add one more thing, Roseanne, before we go. We plan to do these series monthly. So if you guys have a topic that you want us to discuss, it would either be one of the, or more of the four of us, or we can also bring subject matter experts in to conduct the seminar. So let us know what you're interested in learning, and we'll try to make sure we accommodate.
And this will give you that opportunity to create some sort of community with professionals that specialize in these areas that are so important in building that team. And if one of us are not licensed in the state that you need this assistance, we have a network that we can connect with other individuals that practice what it is that we do, or they may specialize in what it is that you need. So, I mean, make use of your connections. So we are connected now. Just remember that.
Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you.
We appreciate y'all. Thank
Thank you
you.
for